Greetings all, and welcome to another session here of Tuesday Talks. Today we're going to continue our discussions in language curriculum design. A lot of this information is based off of the work by Nation and McAllister in their textbook Language Curriculum Design. Today we're going to be looking at needs analysis and the things that you need to do in order to find out what you need to do to set up your program, or your course for that matter. We're going to run through the different types of needs and how we collect that information, some tools that we may want to use to help us gather that analysis, and then any other special issues that may go along with it. You'll notice that we're dealing with this portion of our little diagram that comes from Nation and McAllister's textbook. We're going to be dealing just with that one section now. We're not looking at the whole thing. We're going to be looking at the types of needs. When you do a needs analysis, basically you're walking into a place and you're trying to analyze what is needed to make a program that works, to make a successful program. Part of that may be you're dealing with a course, or you're dealing with a group of courses, a level, for example, or you're dealing with the whole package. You're dealing with the entire program. It may be there already in some part, it may not be there. Point being, you need to go in and assess all of the relevant components in order to find out all the things that you need. Obviously, the first thing you need to do is find out what you have there. Again, you go in and you can start looking at these types of things. Look for lacks. What's missing? Doesn't necessarily mean that that's what they're going to want to have, but you can start to identify things that are missing. Content that may be missing. Again, maybe you're working with a program that is in Belize, and it's a factory where they're learning to, they're building things, and they need English to work within that factory. Well, their missing content may be the content that they need to work in the factory, that specialized language. Obviously, you're also going to be looking at skills. What skills are they lacking? And you might notice a whole lot of reading content that's missing, and that might be okay. You know, they may not need it, but you should identify what it is. So you want to look for missing content and skills that are missing, that are lacking, that they don't have. They may need it, they may not need it, but let's go find out what it is. What's that missing content? Next thing you want to do is find out what the wants are. What type of skills do they want with regard to language? What type of content do they want? What type of quality do they want? Are they going to be moving up higher with regard to quality, or aren't they? I've seen a video off of, I think it's the New York Times, where there's this young lady who wants to learn to pronounce her words more appropriately so that she can get a better job. She's a native speaker, born in the United States. Went to a public school, but she needed assistance. That may be what the want is. It may be that you have students that their want is, they want to be able to play a video game. They want to be able to go to college. I don't know exactly what those wants are. That's what your job is. Go find out what those desired skills are. Go find out what the content desired is, the quality that's desired. Again, maybe they just want confidence. That's why I put that there. Go find out what the needs are. Right? And they may be objective needs, they may be subjective needs. The school is going to be one group of people you're going to want to interview to find out what it is that they need. Maybe there are objective needs from the school, or from the state, or from the future job employee. Find out what those are. The subjective needs are. I don't know how many times I've had students who say, I don't need grammar. I'm sick and tired of grammar. And yet they cannot produce grammatically correct sentences. Now, what's happened to them, I believe, is that they've been forced grammar so much so that they hate any look of grammar inside their classes. Doesn't mean they don't need it, okay? For them, that's a subjective, I don't need this, but they actually will need some if they want to progress. They've just been taught it inappropriately and overabundantly, and so there's a negative feeling there. Anyway, subjective and objective. Okay, it doesn't mean you need to share all of this. You're collecting data, so you can interview them, when you can talk to them, but when you're getting the information, just collect it and use it later for your analysis. You may be looking at skills. Okay, find out what skills they need. Listening, reading, writing, speaking. Look for the databases. Okay, how much vocabulary do they have? How much grammatical information can they use? Do they have? Find out what those needs are. Find out about quality, fluency, accuracy, subject content, as I mentioned before. So go in and find out all this information. Question, of course, is how do I get all this information? How do I walk in and get this information? And you want to do this in, well, as painlessly a way as possible. In the United States right now, just my opinion, there are a whole bunch of tests trying to measure proficiency in a variety of areas or diagnostics in a variety of areas. And I get the impression that some students are tested out. They're sick and tired of being tested. And it seems as if they're being tested for many, many different things from many, many different people. So maybe you want to try to collect information that doesn't look like a test. You may just have an interview where you're literally sitting down with them. Hey, what are you doing? What did you do today? Hey, what did you do yesterday? And it may be that this little conversation you're doing is actually a test. Find out what they know as far as conversational language, or how well they know the tenses. That kind of a thing that you could do. But it does to them, it's just a little conversation. Now, you could also ask them. Find out, let them know. What are you missing? Let them do a self-report. Let them find out. You could do observations. To me, that's a great thing to do. Just watch them, listen to them. Maybe put them in a group and have them talk. You can watch and listen. You can let them tell you what they want. What do the students want? What do the language teachers want? What do the the stakeholders afterwards, be it a company or another school, what do they want? What do they want these students to be when they're done? Let them report. Interviews, observations. You can do testing. And at some point you may want to do that. You may want to do some testing. You also want to review the research on things that are being done, on things that need to be taught, to find out, maybe they don't need this particular thing now. Maybe you've got students, they already got a good 2,500 vocabulary. Maybe we can hold off on emphasizing that for now, because the research indicates they've got at least the base amount that they can use for communicating. Maybe it's other things. So go review some of that literature. In any event, you've got to go find out what those needs are, and here are some ways that you can do it, right? Testing, observation, self-reporting. Biggest thing for me is just keeping an eye on them. Listen to what's going on. They'll be able to tell you without necessarily telling you. All right, some other analysis tools. As I mentioned, you're going to be able to use a variety of these. Let's just go look at the text, for example. Imagine you're walking into a program and they have materials already. Well, you can analyze those materials. You can analyze what vocabulary they're using. You can analyze things from their syllabus. You can analyze what resources they have. Now, if they give you a text and they give you, some note supports, you can't necessarily go in to the textbook and find out, at what vocabulary level is this particular text. You can do it if you have a computer. There are ways where you can put in a block of text and then they can have it analyzed to find out where most of these words are. That's going to help you, to analyze what they have and move forward from there. Looking at the syllabus, do they have a scope and sequence? Do they have a list of requirements for, the 4 skills and the 2 databases? If they do, that's a good thing, right? If they don't, well, then you're thinking maybe it's less defined. As I said, you can interview the teachers, find out what they want, what they need, what they believe is the problem or whatever. You can identify those language needs from there. I would look at all of the stakeholders, the students, the parents, the teachers, the school as a whole, and anyone that's going to be collecting these students for use later on, be it another college, be it a company. And if we can provide for those future stakeholders, obviously these students who are here learning now, they're going to be better off because they're going to be more quickly accepted. So you're going to analyze needs that way. You can analyze wants by primarily interviews and observations. You can identify lacks by doing a variety of things as well. Interviews, review the materials that they have, and some type of a proficiency test. I really do recommend that you use a variety of tools. In other words, get a layer of content that you can use, because if you have a layer of content, it's going to give you a richer description of these needs. So you'll probably want to have, be better off for you to have multiple access to different kinds of data. Additionally, when you're doing an assessment, you're going to try to find materials and the results of the materials that you're going to be using. Make sure that they have some scientific basis for them. Make sure it's reliable, valid, and practical. What I mean is, you're going to go in and analyze a course. You're going to go in and analyze a program. What do they want? What do they need? What do they have? Okay? And then when you go to start building things for them to use in this program, okay, in addition to just the scope and sequence, you're going to start building materials. And you need to make sure those materials are reliable. You need to make sure that those materials are valid, and you need to make sure they're practical. And what I mean by reliable is I'm going to get a consistent result from these materials over and over again. So with a different group of students, if they're taking the same type of test or doing the same type of project, the end result is I'm going to have students that have progressed to X amount. Okay, it's going to be consistent throughout. Valid. Ensure that the content that's covered is actually what is needed. Okay, is it useful for these students? Okay, I'm going to learn this. I'm going to go and learn these materials, and I'm going to get the same result, but is it actually what the students need? Is it actually what's going to help them? Okay, make sure that it's valid. Practical, what's going to be the easiest and most useful. Okay, try not to get focused on, well, this is the newest rave, or this is the nicest software. What's practical? Am I going to be able to do it? In other words, is it going to be efficient, easy to reproduce, and cost-effective? Make it practical. Make it something that they can use rather quickly. Make it something that students can have access to and immediately start using it. Again, whether it's paper and pencil, whether it's a technology, whatever these materials are, it should be practical to them, to where they are. Okay? And let's move on here to some of the issues that you can be looking at when you're doing a needs analysis. Here are some issues that you may want to be aware of, because you may run into them. One of them is the Common Core. And when I say the Common Core, I'm talking about two things. I'm talking about the Common Core, which is now a rather large push in the United States education, where they're trying to ensure that everyone is learning the same basic components for a variety of topics. You, as an ESL teacher, may run into the need of understanding what that Common Core is. That's one issue. There's also the issue of the Common Core related to language mastery. So, for example, there is vocabulary, and I typically go to 3,000, although you can go as low as 2,000, of the highest high-frequency vocabulary, most frequently used words. Okay, high-frequency vocabulary are the vocabulary that you should focus on first. Make sure that your students learn that first. I kind of picture of it as like a trunk of a tree, and then you have all the branches coming off. Okay, the branches are the specialized areas, you know, be it medicine or technology or whatever it is that you're going into, business, whatever. The trunk is going to be that high frequency vocabulary that you want your students to know first, so that they can function almost anywhere. Okay, so that's high frequency vocabulary. You're going to have high frequency grammar as well, high frequency verbs that you'll want to know. And so you should find out what those are. And again, you can see there's a list of grammar that's used more often than others. Those are ones that you want to put an emphasis on. Ones that are simpler to learn. And when I say simpler to learn, that's going to be a little interesting depending on the first language of your students, but that's what you want to be looking for. Those things that are used more often and are easier to learn, again, the simpler things like the simple present or the simple past. Of course, there's all the irregular pasts, but you get my drift, okay? The simpler things and the things that are more frequently used is in terms of grammar. Those you want to focus on first. And then content. What content do you want to focus on first that your students need? Again, make it practical. So find out what that content is and make sure that you include it within any system that you're going to be building. Again, if they're missing the grammar or the vocabulary or the content, those are things that you're going to want to focus on. Those are things that you're going to want to include within your analysis so that you can include it in the scope and sequence in the building of the course and or program. the focus of the materials you're going to be looking at. You should look at both narrow and wide. You should step back and look at the whole picture, and then you should move in and look at the little details. All right, that's the way you ought to be doing it. So, the wide view, does it meet the general language needs? In other words, the core. Does it allow greater overall control and mastery of the things that are going on? Okay, that's the more general one. Then the narrow one, does it meet specific needs? Does it meet the specific needs of your learners? Does it meet their specific content needs, their specific skill needs? Okay, is it faster? Okay, if you have, it will be faster if you're focusing on the material they need. Okay, and I avoid the extraneous things that they don't need. This is the narrow view. Okay, again, earlier I mentioned this factory in Belize where people want to learn the vocabulary of the factory so that they can communicate better. Well, we're narrowing the focus on content so that they can learn that content faster. Okay, obviously there's going to be less content because you go outside this realm, they're not going to have it. But at least they'll be able to function within the factory. If that's the point, if that's the purpose, right? So you want to look at the wide and narrow views of things. Now, obviously, as a language teacher, you want them to have as broad a base of materials, okay, as wide a base as possible, because they'll be better at using the language. Doesn't necessarily mean that that's what you're going to be able to do because of the condition that you're in. The situation that you're in may say, the school may say you're allowed 6 months. That's it. Well, I may not be able to do what I want, or you don't have the money, or you don't have the resources. Other things may constrict you in that sense, especially as a language teacher. Not necessarily what you're going to want, but also do a critical analysis of the philosophies that are involved. Philosophy will impact your needs analysis. I, for example, with regard to language, I am very much an eclectic. I will look at a variety of methods, a variety of teaching language philosophies, and see some good and some ill in all of them. So, for example, when you look at the natural approach, there are some good things in there that I will appropriate. There are others that I won't appropriate. The same would be true for task-based language teaching or form-focused instruction. All of these will have need and be good. So my philosophy is going to be more broad. Others are going to have a more narrow approach. Just for another example, I have tried to work at places and was not hired because they said to me, you will not speak in the native language. And so I'm in a place where everybody around me speaks Spanish, and I'm not allowed to speak Spanish. I'm only allowed to speak English. And I believe that the majority of the time I should speak in English, but there are times where it's expedient to speak in Spanish. And I wasn't hired because of it. They had a philosophy that said, this is not allowed. Okay? You have to bear in mind these different philosophies when you're collecting information, when you're collecting and beginning to do the analysis and building of things, right? I would also recommend that you acquire a variety of viewpoints. Don't just get one, because you're going to probably be locked into someone or something that's more limiting. Get a variety of views so you have a broader view, and you can layer these approaches so that you don't miss anything as you're learning language. It's funny, when you look at the history of a language methodology, you find that there's this little pendulum that goes back and forth. You begin with people that are very strict grammarians, or they do language translation, and then the pendulum swings to far the other way where there's no writing at all. You just listen and repeat. And each time, if you take just that one philosophy, you miss the other parts. Language is a multifaceted system. Language learning is a multifaceted system. So it would be wise to have multiple viewpoints in order to provide better balance. And that's all I have for the needs analysis section here. Needs analysis is extremely important. I would recommend that when you do this, you go slowly, you take notes to find out what it is that needs to be built, okay? after it's built, after you know what needs to be built and you know what resources you have, you can then begin to build a curriculum. You can begin to build a scope and a sequence, and you can begin to build syllabi off of that. But if you don't have the beginning, what do we need? What do we have? You're not going to be able to build the syllabus or the curriculum in any successful way. Okay? Thanks for stopping by, and I hope to see you later.